How many of you are good at keeping secrets? 3, 4, a few of you, 5, 6, maybe 50-50 in this room. But keeping a secret is one of those things that's pretty important to do, right? Especially when it's a good secret. Like if it's a bad secret, that's one thing. But when it's a good secret, like when you know what somebody got somebody else for Christmas or their birthday, right? It gets harder and harder to keep that secret, doesn't it? How many of you have gotten your special someone something super cool and it's kind of hard to surprise them anyway? But you went through all of this work and effort and you made the arrangements and you clicked the order button on Amazon and the thing arrives at the house and you were able to intercept the mail guy so that she doesn't know that it's here, and it's just an awesome thing and you can't wait, and all day long you're walking around going, I've got this gift, I've got this gift, I've got this gift for her, and she doesn't know about it. Anybody else ever done that?
What if the special someone is
neither.
yourself?
It's hard to keep a secret from yourself, I think, Michael. I think that's pretty hard, unless you've just got a lot of voices going on in there. Not sure. So, it's tough to keep a secret. One of our kids is really good at buying gifts. Like, really good at buying gifts for her siblings. And she spends a lot of time thinking and processing and kind of come up with the perfect thing. And last year she got Jack an autographed picture. Not Jack. Yeah, you don't want Jack to buy you gifts. You just don't. It's going to be Bronco socks, probably. That's what you're going to end up with, and they're used. And so, gosh, where was it? Oh yeah. So she got him an autographed picture of the Broncos huddle, like all of the players, and it's all authenticated, and everything. And we knew about it. She shared it with me and her mom and a couple of the other family members. And you're walking around trying to keep the secret going. That's so cool, right? And he loves the Broncos. I don't know if you can tell that or not, but he's Broncoed out today because of that whole thing. So it was really hard not to tell him. Now, if you tell Jack a secret about something that somebody's like, if Taylor was going to buy you a gift and she told Jack, she wouldn't. But if she did tell Jack, you would probably find out way beforehand because Jack can't keep secrets to save his life. You're getting better. But you've got a little ways to go. It's kind of like that. So we've all been in something, hopefully, that it's really hard to keep. And the better the secret, the harder it is to keep, right? All right. Joseph's been keeping a pretty big secret this time. All this time, hasn't he? Would you have been able to do that? Keep in mind, whether they're nice to you or not, they're still your family, right? And you haven't seen them for 22 years. They start showing up in your life, and instead of him saying, hey, I'm Joseph, I don't appreciate what you did to me 22 years ago, he puts them through this series of tests. He wants to know, are these guys changed, or are they the same people or not? And there's all kinds of ramifications that happens if they're not changed. Because these are the people that God's going to build His nation out of. And if they don't have good character, if they haven't been changed by God, there's all kinds of issues that are going to happen then, right? And God has a decision to make. Do I use them or do I do a different thing? God can do anything He wants to do. He's God, right? But their character is changed. And Joseph's watching their character changed all along. And last week, in chapter 44, this is kind of the climax, the pinnacle of. We kind of pressed pause last week, and we don't know how it resolved. But we talked specifically last week about people that are vision chasers. And Judah's a vision chaser, and Jacob's a vision chaser, and Joseph's a vision chaser. People that are choosing to follow after God, choosing to pursue things of God, and choosing all of that. We talked about how when we are vision chasers, from last week, just like those 3 guys, we are changed by God. Thank God we're changed by God. Hopefully today, you are a much different person than you were 2 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I am. God has done incredible things. And I'll tell you this, He hasn't stopped. Because when I see what He's changed me into, even from last week, I'm amazed. Because I couldn't do it without Him. And neither can you. Vision chasers are changed by God. That means you don't have to work really hard at it. You just have to hold fast to Him and let Him change you. That's good news, folks. Right? You don't have to put a rubber band on your wrist to snap your wrist every time. You can trust that God is working in your life and He's creating you to be something new. It doesn't mean you don't try. It just means that it's not all up to you. That you've got a helper in that. Vision chasers are changed by God. Vision chasers, changed by God, take bold risks for God. So once you've been changed by God, then nothing is the same. It can't be. Because you've got the power of God living inside of you. So your life should look different. You should have a different perspective on things. You should understand that this great God showed you all kinds of love and mercy and compassion and kindness, that's been incredibly patient with you, way more patient than even your parents have been, and your parents are pretty patient people. Believe it or not. They could be a lot more upset with you than they probably are right now. Because they love you. They do. But God's even more patient than that. Vision chasers, changed by God, take bold risks for God because we understand that He took a bold risk for us. And we cannot stay the same. And so when we see things that are unjust, we want to stand up for it. When we see people that are in need, we want to help them. When we see people that need a little encouraging word and a little love in their lives, we go above and beyond. And you guys do this now. You are incredibly generous. You're incredibly encouraging. You're incredibly supportive. It is a privilege to know you because you are already doing this, taking a bold risk for God, taking bold action for God, just means operating out of the way that He's changed you and living your life full of mercy. Our God is rich in mercy, and so are you. And kindness overflows. People that are vision chasers are changed by God. They take bold risks to God, and they leave the results to God because you can't control the outcome, can you? Which means that no matter how many times you smile at your coworker and try to talk to them about important things, and they're still crusty and jerks to you, that's okay. Because you're not responsible for changing them. You're responsible for you. And you let God change them. But it doesn't change how you're kind to them at all. So vision chasers are changed by God, take bold action for God, sometimes risks for God, and leave the results to God. And we saw Judah last week stand up to Pharaoh's right-hand man and say, "Excuse me, sir, can I talk to you for a second?" Which was not typically allowed in those kinds of things. He's putting himself right in the potential way of getting just destroyed by Joseph's wrath. But he does it anyway. He says, "I have a story to tell you." And he pours out this story of how much he loves and cares for his dad. And what will happen if Benjamin, his little brother, doesn't go back home to see dad. It's going to ruin his dad. He says, "It will kill dad if you don't do something. So please, don't keep him, keep me." And Judah puts himself in this incredibly sacrificial place. It was an incredibly bold move on his part. But he'd been changed by God, and Joseph saw it. And what that did for Joseph was allow him to take another bold step. Watch what happens in chapter 45, verse 1. It's in the midst of this room that was probably pretty big. All of these brothers are there. There's a lot of other officials. And Judah's pleading his case before Joseph and coming right out, just utter transparency with Joseph. And this is how Joseph responds. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all of his attendants, and he cried out, "Have everyone leave my presence," because he doesn't want everybody to know at this point what's going on. He's just going to be with him and his brothers. everyone leaves his presence, so there was no one left with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. He can't keep it a secret any longer. It's too good a news not to share. It's gone on long enough. This is it. It's built to the utmost place, and Joseph can't control himself at this point. So there was no one with him when he made himself known to his brothers. Verse 2 says, and he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Probably not from the building that Joseph was in. He wasn't weeping so loud that like down the street the other people could hear it. Although in our house later today, if the Broncos score, people down the street might be able to hear the celebration that goes on from a particular family member. I won't mention names. But they probably heard about it because of all the commotion and everything else that was going on. And the servants were probably at the door listening and then reporting back to everybody else. That doesn't matter. But what matters is that he wept so loudly. Why? Because all of those years, all of that pent-up emotion comes out. It's all coming out now. He's had to keep himself as composed as possible up until this point in time. But now, it's open. He's just opening himself up to his brothers. There's probably a lot of loneliness in that. I mean, for 22 years, he didn't have a family member in sight, except for his Egyptian wife and his kids. She didn't understand what home was for him, but these guys do. They probably smell like home. They look like home. All of this time that he's been waiting for this moment, it all comes out in this. He wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph says to his brothers, I am Joseph. Remember Judas saying, our brother that is no longer, our dad lost him. It was one of his favorites. And so we can't go back without another brother at this point. And Joseph says, I am Joseph. But look at how he starts it. Hey guys, I need to tell you something. That's not how he starts it. He just comes out, so he's this blubbering mess. He says, I'm Joseph. I'm Joseph. Look what happens. I'm Joseph. Is my father still living? But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. Okay, look, I'm a really visual person. And so for me to get into this story, I have to think about what it might look like. These brothers we know are kind of rough characters. They've been shepherds for a long time. They know what it is to live in the wilderness. They've been out. They can survive. They're like Bear Grylls or whatever the guy's name is, right? Did I say it right? Close enough? Grylls. Okay. They're like this mountain man guy. They're standing in front of Joseph, who looks very Egyptian, shaved face. You know, they work makeup and stuff, right? We know that from pictures. The pictures that they draw on the wall. I mean, not like Instagram. All right. And so it's totally different, and all along in every encounter the brothers have had with Joseph at this point, they've been using an interpreter. Because we know that Joseph understands them, but he uses an interpreter to speak back to them. So they're standing there. Judah just comes out with this big plea. They're probably expecting, the big hammer to come out just on Judah at that point, and then who knows what Joseph's going to do. But that's not about what happens. The guy bursts into tears. Bursts into tears. And when you are crying like that and trying to talk, is it easy to understand or not? No. Usually, you see subtitles. And so you can read along, even though they're speaking English, you're reading English below it, because you just can't understand when we're watching these kinds of things happen on live television. But not only that, he's speaking to them in their native language, which he hadn't done up until this point. They're shocked. One, they understand, well, as much as they can understand the guy through his weeping, but he's using their language. Secondly, that he's saying, I am Joseph. And what would you have thought if for 22 years you felt guilty or bad about selling? You haven't seen him, you haven't heard a story about him, you have no idea where he is, and yet here he is at the apex of power in Egypt, the only place on earth that can save you from this famine. And he's telling them, I'm Joseph. Is Dad okay? And they're like, it says they were terrified and unable to answer him. Let's keep going. The Bible's so cool because these accounts that we have written down, like if you were going to make this stuff up, you probably would make it different than this. And the brothers were like, Joseph! And they hug and everything's great. No, that's not what happened. This is true life stuff right here. Then Joseph said to his brothers, come close to me because he can tell the shock in their eyes. Right? They don't know what to do. They can't speak because of all of this that's happening. This guy's weeping. He sends everybody out. He's talking to them in their native language, and he's claiming to be somebody that they didn't ever expect to see again in their lives. He says, come closer to me. When they'd done so, he says, I'm your brother Joseph, the one who sold to Egypt. And then I'm sure it starts to kind of come together a little, like, are you processors or are you pretty quick? I wish that I was quicker than I am. You know, I always think of the stuff to say after, like when I'm at home. Like I'll have this encounter out in the street with somebody and they'll say something and I'll either be upset by that or think, you know, I wish I could have handled that better, you know, or something like that. And I wish that I could have processed faster. And then I think about it, right? Some people are like that, slow processors. Doesn't mean you're dumb, because I don't want to call myself dumb. Some people are super fast processors, but regardless, he's giving them some more time. He's giving them, you know, some more information. He's trying to bring them along a little bit more because it's just starting to compute for them. I'm the one. Remember 22 years ago when you sold me into slavery? And they're like, how did he know that? But this is the second time he said, I'm Joseph. I'm Joseph. They're terrified. I'm Joseph, the one you sold into slavery. And they're still trying to figure it all out. And he says, do not be distressed. And don't be angry for yourselves for selling me here. Wow. I mean, think about that. 22 years later, and you're facing your brothers, telling them what's going on, and you don't say, you guys suck for selling me. That was really cruel for you to do that. I can't believe. He says, don't feel bad about what you did. Don't feel bad for what you did. It's okay. Don't be distressed. He's concerned about how they're going to react and respond. Now remember, he's seen their character come out over these last couple of tests, so he knows that God's changed their hearts, but he doesn't want them to walk around in resentment the rest of their lives or for the rest of this conversation. Life is too short for that. He says, don't be distressed and don't be angry with yourselves. Don't fight about it specifically, because it was saved to save the lives that God sent me ahead of you. Because it was to save your lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now, there's been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years, there will be no plowing and reaping. Next slide. He's telling them, look, we've got 5 more years of this to go, and I'm here for a reason. I'm here for a reason. See, guys, God sent me ahead of you. The fact that he knows that there's 5 years left shows the relationship that he has with God. And God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Joseph understands what his one thing is. He understands what his one thing is. He is here to love and honor God and to save people. Now, whether he was aware of that the entire time or not, I have no idea. But we know for sure that he gets it. That I am in this position to save your lives, he's telling me. That's what I'm here for. Wouldn't you love that? He knows. Wouldn't you love to know? Like, sometimes I just like to know. Like, God, okay. I mean, what's the one thing? I was at not a conference, but kind of a meeting that sometimes pastors and town come together for different things. And last week there was one of those things where a guy had written a book, and so one of my buddies invited me to be part of this. Guy was talking about this book, and he told this story. Some of you football nuts will get this, but apparently way back, Auburn was playing some other team, and it's like one of the greatest plays ever, where the Auburn quarterback was super good and could throw a ball, wherever, and they were playing somebody else. Probably the Texans. Wow. Anyway, and so, it's coming down to the very last couple of minutes, and Auburn's ahead, and it's this huge rivalry. Whoever Auburn and their biggest rival is, it's that kind of rivalry. And so it comes down to the last few minutes. Some of you that know football better than me might know this story better than I'm telling you right now. But anyway, Auburn was winning. They didn't have to do, all they had to do in the last couple seconds of the game was down the ball. The quarterback takes the ball, he takes a knee, and then the clock runs out and everything's good. But the Auburn quarterback was a senior. He didn't want to go out that way. He's like, we're going to trample this other team. We've got a chance, and I've got the arm to really rack some points up on him. And so sure enough, he calls this play against the coach's better judgment, and he throws this long bomb to his open receiver in the end zone. But what happens to be is that the number one defensive players on the other team, super fast, lightning fast, okay? But the Auburn quarterback thinks, because I've got this great arm, I can beat everybody else, no big deal. The guy intercepts the ball in the end zone and starts to run it back. Now this great quarterback is super slow. So the super fast defensive guy goes blowing by everybody. Nobody can catch this guy. And the only thing left between him and the end zone, where they would go ahead if he scored and win the game, was the quarterback. Quarterback caught. Okay? Catches him running down the field, slow quarterbacks running it, and tackles him right before he gets to the end zone. Time's out, no way for them to win. And at the end, the coaches are talking, and the coach on the losing team says to the coach on the winning team, how is it that the slowest quarterback in the league was able to tackle my fastest defender in the league? And the coach for Auburn looks at the guy and says, because your boy was running for a touchdown, and my boy was running for his life. Right? It's all a matter of perspective. Wouldn't you like to know what that is, though? Wouldn't you like to know what your thing is, what your motivating factor is? What is it that would allow you to run down the field at full speed, knowing I got one job to do, one thing to do, I'm going to stop this guy from making a touchdown. I don't care how fast he is, I don't care how big he is, I don't care what's going on. Joseph knows it. I'm sent ahead of you to save you because God ordained it. He's got his laser-like focus on what it is. And I'm telling you, the sooner we understand what our motivation is, man, the rest of the world just kind of fades into background. And we can stay focused on what's important, like Joseph. Verse 8, so then it was not you who sent me here. Don't be mad at yourselves. Don't resent what happened. Don't look back and beat yourself up over it, because it wasn't about you. Because God had a greater plan. And He's the one that sent me, not you. It was not you who sent me here, but God. Anytime you see those two simple words in your Bible, you should circle them. Because this is where we get to see the difference between other gods and our God. Between normal human circumstances and what our God's capable of doing. And if you don't buy into these two words right here, Your faith will always be average. But as soon as you see that no matter what's stacked against you in life, I was facing a job loss, but God. I was going through a difficult breakup, but God. I had to declare financial bankruptcy, but God. See, anytime we can put these two words into our active and living faith, everything changes. When we understand this word right here, these two words right here, our prayer life changes. God, we are faced with real difficult circumstances, but you can overcome them all. This is a powerful two-word sentence right there. But God, but God, but God, do you believe that God is capable? Do you believe? See, what Joseph understood by saying, guys, don't blame yourselves, God has a plan, is that every event is controlled by God. Every event is controllable by God. Every event, no matter if it's good or bad, no matter if it's evil or righteous, no matter if the person that you're dealing with is a good person or not, God can still use that event to enact His purposes. And Joseph knows firsthand that's true. Because he's just living his life happy as a clam. Daddy loves him. He's got a cool coat. He's got a cool job. Go check on your brothers and report back to me. And the next thing he knows, his world is upside down for the next 20-some odd years. Up and down, and up and down, and up and down, and up and down. And many of you come in here from Sunday to Sunday. Some Sundays you've got a big smile on your face because your week's like, great, woo, passed that test, right? Got an extra hour of sleep. Some of you in college know what I'm talking about. An extra hour of sleep's a big deal this week. Some of you come in on Sunday mornings and you're worn out from how hard your week is. Just drained by it. But God, guys, but God, He can use those ups and He can use those downs, and He is in control. And He's going to have His way, no matter what happens. The brothers couldn't stand in His way. Potiphar couldn't stand in His way. Potiphar's wife couldn't stand in His way. The prison official couldn't stand in His way. Pharaoh himself couldn't stand in His way. But God shows up again and again and again and again and again in Joseph's life. But God, it is awesome. But God did this, guys. He made me father to Pharaoh, Lord of his entire household, and ruler of all of Egypt. Remember, Pharaoh's like, I don't know you, kid, but your plan's good. Here's my visa. Here's the keys to my car. Here's the finest house in town. You have everything. I'm going to go figure out what I'm going to eat for dinner. You're in charge of everything else. All of Egypt is under Joseph's rule because of God. Because of God's plan. Because of the way God orchestrated it. And because of what God's trying to do to deliver His people. Pretty cool. Now, he says, verse 9, hurry back to my father and say to him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me Lord over all of Egypt. Come down to me. Don't delay. Joseph's longing to see his dad. He's seen his brothers, but he hasn't seen his dad. You know what's interesting? Up until this point, his brothers haven't said a word. Okay? They're still in shock. They're still not sure what to do with this, okay? It's Joseph doing all the talking. Let's see what happens next. You shall live in the region of Goshen and be near me. You, your children, your grandchildren, your flocks and herds, and all you have, I will provide for you there. Because 5 years of famine are still to come. Otherwise, you and your household and all who belong to you will become destitute. What's interesting about this whole thing right here is he's not just saying, I will provide for you, which is to sustain, to enable, to allow, to continue. He's saying, I'm going to make sure that you have plenty to eat and plenty of stuff. I'm going to do that. That's one thing, to get them through the famine. But Joseph understands that he's going to bring them down here and allow them to prosper in this land. He understands that this is a remnant. He understands that God is building his people up during this time and in this place, in Egypt. Otherwise, if you guys stay where you're at, you're going to starve to death. You can see for yourselves, he says in verse 12, and so can my brother Benjamin, that it is I, really, I who am speaking to you. Next section. He says, tell my father all about the honor accorded to me in Egypt, and about everything you have seen, and bring my father down here quickly. And he threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept. And Benjamin embraced him weeping, and he kissed all of his brothers and wept over them. And afterward, his brothers talked. Afterwards, his brothers talked. Up until this point, they were still overwhelmed by all of this information that was coming to them. So, unbelievable turn of events for these guys, right? Unbelievable turn of events. Joseph, who they sold, who's been giving them a problem all along by making them jump through all of these hoops, now comes clean with them, speaking in their own language, in his own way. He's saying, guys, come here, it's me, look, it's me. Here's what God did. You guys meant it for this, but God did something completely different, and he sent me ahead of you. Don't feel bad, because that's his plan, that was his design. All of that stuff is great. And so they're like, oh, it is you. And they hug one another, and we were talking about this because one of Ken's favorite words to use, during that greeting and welcome time is like hug a neck. And Caleb doesn't like that term at all. He doesn't, like, hugging necks is just kind of weird to him. So he's brought it up. And so Ken will say hug a neck, go meet somebody, hug a neck. And Caleb's like a little uncomfortable by the whole thing, hug a neck. And so we were talking about how crazy would it be, because not just did they hug necks, but they're kissing each other's necks. That's even weirder. So kids, just end with hug a neck, okay? No more, we don't need to kiss necks, all right? There's a line in the sand. Hugging is okay, kissing is not okay, but they're showing all kinds of compassion and love for one another, and I can just feel the brothers go, it's Joseph. It's all going to be okay. It's all going to be okay. And he's saying, guys, go get Dad. Bring Dad back. By this point in time, Pharaoh's household is well aware of the situation. So the rest of the chapter is Pharaoh showing up saying, here's what you do. Take a bunch of wagons home. Tell your parents and your family to leave their possessions in Canaan. Leave them there. You're not going to need them here. Bring a toothbrush and come on back. Bring your kids, your crop, your livestock, and I'm going to give you everything that you need to make a go of it here. And I'm going to replace all of your possessions with the best of Egypt. Isn't that awesome? Pharaoh just reflects what Joseph had already told them and says, yeah, guys, that's great. We're so excited. Your family's going to be reunited. Come on down. We've got this place over here in Goshen, and it's yours. No questions asked. So that's pretty exciting. Joseph loads up some neat gifts and things for his dad, and he sends his brothers back home, and they show up on Jacob's doorstep, and they're like, you're not going to believe this. And the rest, you guys can read this later, but it's this just beautiful picture of Jacob going, wait, no. It says he was stunned by the news. He wasn't able to respond, just like the brothers. He can't even explain it. But he looks around. He sees all the gifts. He sees all of the stuff. He sees the carts that are there to haul their stuff back. He sees, the boys, they're all back in one piece, all of them, even Simeon, who was in jail up until that point, right? They're all released, they're all back, and they're all telling him this great news of Joseph, and it says his spirit's revived. His spirit's revived. Judah explains to Joseph that Dad's not in great shape and more bad news may kill him. And then all of a sudden we see this guy who's got a spring in his step. He's ready to go. Let's get there, he says. Let's get there. And it's a beautiful end to this drama that had been going on. And it's because God said, I'm going to save my people this way. Now here's what I had to stop and think about. Because if you're like me and you're reading this stuff, you ask a lot of questions, and I'm like, wait, what? Why? Why does he take Jacob and Jacob's family out of Canaan, which was the promised land? Okay? They were in the promised land. Let me just say that one more time so we get it through our heads. They were in the promised land. And then God sends a famine, but he sent Joseph ahead. I mean, think about how complicated this story is. He sends Joseph ahead to rise or fall, rise power, and then be over everything with this vision about 7 years of famine and all of that kind of stuff. He sends all of this so that he can take this small family, 70 some odd people, and move them to Egypt to save their lives. Only so that they can grow to a place that they started to tick off all the Egyptians, because pretty soon there's a lot of these Hebrews here. And 400 years later, he sends Moses to lead them, guess what? Out of Egypt back to what? They were in the promised land. You ever sit back and go, God, what are you doing? Like the same God that could organize this kind of story, this kind of event, and all of this kind of stuff to get Joseph over there, bring the whole family over there, and you're like, couldn't you have just like made it rain in Canaan? I mean, come on. If you can control all of Egypt, can't you just like make the famine happen elsewhere? And why? Did you guys not ask those kinds of questions? Maybe it's just me, that's okay. It is okay. But I ask why? Why? And here's the answers that I came up with, because God, he's God. He can do what he wants to, okay. Secondly, I think God is always trying to show us that we can depend on him, that we can grow in him. Like if you stagnate, if you stay in a place too long, you can probably bet that God's going to come in and shake things up a little bit, because he wants you reaching out to him. He wants you longing for him. He wants to grow you. He wants to make you deeper. He wants to do all of those things, which I get. But it still seems like a pretty big situation for him to put out there on these people anyway. And so it comes down to one thing for me. Because God loves you. Like, how does that? That's a pretty simplistic answer. Well, I'm a pretty simple guy, but here's the thing. God loves you. God loves you. He loves you. He loves you. He loves them. He loves Joseph. He loves Jacob's family. He loves them all. And over and over and over and over and over again, God is showing you how much he loves you. He's showing you what he's willing to do for you. He's showing you who he is. Because he loves you, he wants you to know him. So every time we approach the scriptures, we get an opportunity to see God in a different way. He's saying, I love you. I want you to see me differently than you have before. If you stay in the promised land, you're not going to know me the way that I can reveal to you myself through this whole thing about who I am. And how does he do that? He does that through Joseph. See, Joseph was sent ahead. Jesus was sent ahead. Joseph was denied by his brothers the first time and rejected. Jesus was denied by his brothers and rejected. Joseph suffers to offer forgiveness. Jesus suffered the ultimate to offer you forgiveness. Joseph accepts his brothers when they come to him with this repentant heart. and say, we were wrong about what we did years ago, and our family needs you, and we need salvation, and you're here. And Joseph says, I'll give you forgiveness because you're repentant. If they hadn't been, it probably would have been a different story, right? But he offers all of them forgiveness. And then he provides for them in ways beyond their imagination and says, come on over here and live with me. And Jesus does the same thing. When you put your faith in him, he says, you are no longer citizens of the world, you're citizens of heaven. You are my family, and you will live with me forever, and I will provide for you forever, and I will make you prosperous, and I will give you all that you need for everything. I will be God. In the Bible it says that Christ himself will be our light. You won't have the sun because he'll just be that bright. See, he's showing us over and over and over and over and over and over and over again in his word how he loves you. And he's showing you who he is. And he says, I'm like Joseph. I'm like Joseph for you. And I want you to know me. And I want you to know me. God is constantly revealing to us how he loves us. And this story is no different. How can you not respond to that with joy and gratitude and acceptance and a willingness to be like, wow, you can have all of me. You can have all of me. All of my heart, all of my mind, all that you've given me, it's all yours. And that's pretty cool for God to do, isn't it? Guys, these stories could have been blotted out in history a million different ways, a million different times, but he saved that for you. He saved it for you, so that you might know him. Because he loves you. He could have left his family in Canaan in the promised land. He could have never included this whole way of moving them to Egypt, only to move them back again. But over and over and over and over and over, he wants us to know who he is. If you don't know who he is, my hope is that you're learning more about him through these stories of real people in a real time in history doing real things for God. And I just encourage you not to leave here today until you know him first. The rest of us, man, that's the kind of God we serve. That no matter what happens, good or bad, he's there with us. He's going to accomplish his will, and it should give us the opportunity to live bold lives for him, right? So let's do it this week.